God cares about your career journey and God cares about your well-being. Welcome to For His Glory podcast. If it's your first time, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber and listener, welcome. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you an encouragement. I feel this is a season where we need encouragement more than ever. And this encouragement comes from my own life. It's going to be more of a vulnerable story on the podcast. So if you enjoy it, please engage in the comments. If you listen to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, actually Spotify has introduced comments, so you can leave some comments on the episodes and let me know what you think about it. Otherwise, it's to the glory of God, and let's get right into this episode. Before I start any episode, I always say a prayer. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for this day. I thank you so much for this episode. I pray that you speak through me. May I decrease and may you increase. I also pray that this word will bring encouragement to someone out there who is struggling with their life, who feels life is not going their way. May you encourage them. And as we pick this encouragement, may it fuel us to keep us moving. Not to throw in the towel, but to keep trusting and believing in you, because you are the author and the finisher of our faith. I pray that your goodness and your mercy shall prevail in everyone's life. And I pray that you continue to guide us on this walk with you and our day-to-day life. I welcome your presence in everyone's heart who is watching and listening to this episode. May you comfort them, because you're the God of all comfort. Thank you so much for this word. In Jesus' name, I do pray and believe. Amen. I promised on the podcast I'll be sharing with you my career story. I've shared more about my career story on my other podcast. I have two podcasts. The other one is called The Frame Solutions, and it's where I share career-based tips, my career stories, and anything in terms of career development. But in this episode, I'm going to share with you the biblical perspective of my career. So I've had a minute to think about my career, and I've seen that everything that I've gone through on my career journey has been connected to the purpose that God has called me to do. As you listen and watch this video, I would also want you to connect the dots of your career story and your life and see those instances in your life where God has come through, or where God has led you to what you are. God cares about your career journey and God cares about your well-being. That's the first thing you need to do. So my career started in Uganda. I'm a Ugandan who lives in Australia, turned Australian. When I was in Uganda, from a young age, I knew I would be a doctor, but I could not get into medicine, so I went and did medical research. So I'm starting my story from 2011. 2011, I graduated with my undergraduate in biomedical sciences, and I wanted to get a job. But it took me up to like 8 months to get a job after I'd graduated. During those points, I was doing more volunteering and upping my skills from the different institutions we have in Uganda. And I recall this one time I prayed to God and I told him, this is the last application I'm sending. If I don't get a job from this application, I don't know, but I'm tired of sending applications and not getting any job. I had a friend of mine, she's called Stella. What she did, she carried my application. Those days there was no submitting online. She carries my application and takes it to the organization where she was working. She was also an intern at that organization, but me, I was interning at a different organization. I hope this makes sense. So she submits my application with the application. And for that, I'm very much grateful for you, Stella, for pushing me to submit that application. If I hadn't submitted that application, I don't think I would have gotten the job. So I ended up getting that job with her. We worked together for 2 years, and that was the beginning of my scientific career. While I was at that workplace, I knew that I wanted to do a master's degree and also do a PhD. And during those times of the 2 years as I got there, after my first year, I started looking for scholarships, because I had made a resolution that I was not going to do my master's and my PhD in Uganda. I wanted to get international experience. I wanted to work for organizations outside my country eventually, and I wanted to study either in the UK, America, Canada. Australia was not even on the radar of the places I wanted to study. During that time when I was applying for the scholarships, I never got any of them. And I also went back to the drawing board and did a lot of things in terms of finding myself a mentor, acquainting myself on how to write resumes and cover letters, learning from the failures that I'd experienced while applying for the scholarships that I didn't get. This is just going to be a brief one because I've done a detailed episode on the other podcast. I'll link it down. Eventually, I ended up getting a scholarship to move to the University of Manchester for my master's. So I get to Manchester, I enjoyed my time there. Everything was well. But as I was finishing my master's, I also wanted to do a PhD. As an ambitious girl, I always wanted to look for opportunities to upskill or do things that were going to move me in the line of getting a PhD. So while I was in Manchester, I think it was around May, I find a scholarship opportunity to go and present research at a Keystone Symposium. If you're a scientist, you know that presenting work that you do or putting your work out there is very important, especially if you want to grow as a scientist. So I found the scholarship for a travel grant to go to the US. I went to Washington, Seattle to present my thesis, my master's thesis. I presented a poster, went back to the UK, finalized my master's, and while I was finalizing my master's, I came across the scholarship to come to Australia to do my PhD. So I ended up applying for the scholarship and I ended up also getting it. That whole journey from my undergraduate to getting a master's scholarship, from the master's scholarship to going to the UK, from the UK getting a travel grant scholarship to go and present my work at the Keystone Symposium in America, Washington, Seattle, and also getting a scholarship to come to Australia to do my PhD was a smooth journey. I didn't experience any hardship. At that point of my life, everything that I wanted to do, God was fulfilling. As soon as I got my scholarship for master's, there was a domino effect in everything that I wanted to achieve. I would do something and it would go through. So the grace of God was upon my life. So I ended up coming to Australia to do my PhD. I didn't really know what it would take to do a PhD. I just knew I wanted to do a PhD at the end of the day. So I came to Australia to do my PhD, and my PhD journey was not easy at all. I faced a lot of imposter syndrome. I also faced a lot of challenges with my supervisory team, and the project I was working on was not working. So I found myself so many times at the bottom of everything. I was at rock bottom many times as my PhD was progressing. I recall one time I even had to call my mom to pray with me, and I told her, "Mommy, I think I'm just going to leave Australia, pack up my bags and come back to Uganda. I've always been a go-getter, but these things are not working and I don't want it to be to the detriment of my mental health." One time I was with a friend of mine and I started to lose breath. Then I told her, she's like, "Oh, Faith, you're going to get a panic attack," because I was so stressed during my PhD, the point that I ended up losing weight. I wanted to lose weight, but the weight just kept on dropping. Every time I would see one of my supervisors, my heart would pump, like you meet someone in the corridor and you just freeze. So I felt it wasn't the right position. So I took time off to pray to God. I recall that point when I was praying, I got my journal, and while I was writing my prayer journal, it was more like a prophecy. The things I wrote were from my heart, but I believe it was God speaking through. I've shared an episode of it. I'll leave it linked with the details of what I wrote in that journal. But in that journal, at that point, I wrote down things that have come true now. And looking back, I can say that it was God speaking through me as I wrote what I wrote in that journal. The episode will be linked in this episode, so don't worry about that. So as God would be merciful, He carried me through the PhD. When I was finishing my PhD, I ended up changing my supervisory team. I got a new supervisor who was very helpful to make sure that I finished my PhD in time, and I submitted. My PhD was so hard that at the end of it, I didn't even have a journal paper. Usually when you've done a PhD, they expect you to have like at least a presentation or have an article you've written in a journal paper. The project, I left it going because my thesis was just a small portion of the big project that was going in the lab. And up to now, they've never published the work, which is okay. But as that happened, I found that looking back at my PhD journey, I see that it was God through all the points of my PhD. Coming from Uganda, going to the UK, presenting in America, coming to Australia for the PhD, and getting to the point that I'm at right now, I would say that God connected the dots. even through the mess I was experiencing, he connected the dots for my career. So I finished a PhD and I wanted to start working. That's when the pandemic was on, so I stayed home, and I was a new mom. I just had my firstborn. So I stayed home for 1 year to have time to raise my child, and also the world was closed, so I could not do much. So when that was done, I started looking for a job. But at some point I was so scared. I'm wondering, I'm a PhD graduate. All I have is one journal paper, which was a collaboration with the rest of the team in my lab where I was working. I've not published my thesis. So how are people going to believe that I'm a PhD who can do the work I'm doing?
So I applied for 3 jobs and I got invited to the interviews on all the 3 jobs. But when I got to the interviews, the first interview was not right. The job description was fine, but when I went into the interview, I felt the job wasn't for me and I wouldn't really love it. So job 2 was a dream job and job 3 was a referral. So I got job 2 and job 3.
But as God would be merciful, and in it with me, I landed this job at the company that I was working at. It was a very great job. I loved everything about it. I got this job. I was in charge of a project. We were generating therapeutics, which are small molecule therapeutics for treating viruses. And as soon as I got into that workplace, I told my bosses that give me 3 months to optimize everything that we are going to do. And in 3 months, if I give you the results that we intend to get in this project, I'll have to renegotiate my salary. And in 6 weeks, I was able to do the work. And I had a renegotiation of my salary. And I ended up getting the salary I wanted from the first place. So I was earning enough money to live a very comfortable life. And I loved the job. The fact that I just came with my PhD with not so much of accolades out of my PhD. And my bosses saw that I was the fit person to do this project. I enjoyed everything. I found that they were listening to me more than I'd ever been listened to in any of my careers, especially as a PhD student. My supervisors never used to listen to me. I found that this work gave me an opportunity to thrive. And as I was doing my work, of course, we apply for grants, because if you're a scientist, you know that many of the times the funding you get is through grant funding, whereby governments, organizations give you money to do the work that you propose to do. Last year around October, we applied for grants and we didn't get any of the funding. So my bosses had to come to a difficult decision to let me go, because they could not sustain my salary and they could not keep me without them having the funding they needed. I said this out of goodwill. The company I was working with was a small company. I believed in their mission. I believed in their mandate. They wanted to generate drugs and therapeutics to treat different viral diseases. That's what we were doing. And it was lovely and I enjoyed it. I'm in good talking terms with the company. They gave me a chance to develop my career and also to refine my interest in research. So this is not out of bad will, but I lost my job. So I lost my job right after I'd lost my dad. I lost my dad last year in October, so I had to go back to Uganda for his funeral and send off. I come back to Australia in November. Then at the end of the year, I'm told my contract will not be renewed because there was no funding. So I get to the point where I'm thinking, okay, now I have to go back and look for a new job. I have to find ways to make my career work. And I also have to find ways to get back into employment. Of course, I still had the grief from the loss of my parent. My dad died abruptly. Then I also had the grief of losing a job and the uncertainty of the recession that is presumed to be going on in the world. So I gave myself some months to just recover and feel better, see what I would do, and also go back to the drawing board and figure out what I would want out of my career. In this instance, I came to God and I told him, okay, God, this is what it is. Please make a way. January came, February, March, April, May, June. Applied, of course, for a couple of jobs. Some of them, the interview processes were not nice at all. Others, I didn't hear from them. And to date, I've not had a job for the last 7 months. During this point, I came to God and I was telling him, okay, God, what's really happening? What's going on with my career? I decided to pray and fast. I've been doing it for a couple of times. Initially, when I was doing my prayer and fasting, I was fasting because I wanted God to give me a breakthrough. But after I did it for a couple of times and it wasn't coming through, I decided to just pray and fast and seek God's counsel and also grow intimate with God. And one word that God gave me during this period of my fast and everything that I've had to go through is from the book of Psalm 62. And I'm going to read from verse 1. It says, "Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly he's my rock and my salvation. He's my fortress. I'll never be shaken." That is 1 to 2. Then verse 5, this is exactly what God told me. "Yes, my soul finds rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly he's my rock and my salvation. He's my fortress. I'll not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He's my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge." That is from Psalm 62, verse 5 to verse 8. And Psalm 1 and 2 are the ones that God gave me. Recently, when I was going to bed, as I lay in bed, I finished my prayers, I decided to sleep, and God gave me this scripture. When I came to read it, I found that it applied to my life. And also the other scripture I got was from Psalm 30 verse 5, and it says, "His anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning." When I got these two scriptures, because I was praying to God and asking him, please give me a sign, what's really happening in my life? I've come to a point whereby I've had other people talk about me saying, oh, Faith is doing this, or Faith has given up on her career. And it's so funny that many of the times, the people you really trust, the people you really love, the people who know you are the people who are going to talk about you such things. As I see it also in Job, when he went through his afflictions, his friends came and told him, I think you've sinned, I think God has abandoned you. All his friends kept on finding things to tell Job about his life. But Job had not done any sin, and Job had been faithful with God. But I've had people talk about me things which are not true, that I've given up on my career, that I've decided to be a YouTuber, that I'm just not doing anything to find a job. And it's very disheartening to hear this from people who you know are your friend. Of course, the people who bring me this news are people who I love and trust. But when I hear that people can end up talking about someone because of what you're going through, instead of standing with you and encouraging you, because as you might know that sometimes you have to go through a situation in your life whereby you have no control over it. There's so many things we go through, especially when it comes to looking for a job. You don't have control over who will choose you and who won't choose you. It's not that I just sit home at the end of the day and I don't apply for jobs. I apply for jobs. It's not that I just sit home and just put my legs up and not look for employment because I'm thinking, oh, God is going to look after me. Now that I have a podcast where I share about God, I do everything in my means to make sure that I apply for jobs, to make sure I call recruiters, to make sure I send my cover letters, my resumes, because I've done this for other people. I've coached so many people in their career journeys to achieve their career goals. So how would I just throw in a towel in my own career because I'm thinking I'm not going to get a job? Now I become a YouTuber. So people sometimes can say mean things, especially when you're trying to do something for yourself. For a long time, I lived in the shadow of others. In the shadow of others, in the sense that many of the times when I wanted to do things for myself, I would think about what do people think? What will people think when they see me doing that? But at the beginning of the year, as I always do, God gave me a word of the year. And the word of the year he gave me was from Isaiah 41 verse 10. That says, "Fear not, for I'm with you." I don't know, I'm getting emotional. I get emotional because it's strange, especially when you're navigating something hard in your life. When you're navigating something hard in your life, it's strange that some people might not see what you're going through, right? Let me read it. It's Isaiah 41 verse 10. This is my word of the year. If you're to go back and watch the video I shared in January, at the start of the year, I always choose a word for the year because I pray about it, and the word God gave me this year was fear not, I am with you. I didn't anticipate that what I would be going through right now would require me not to fear, because I've gone through a lot in my life in the last, let's say, 8 months. There've been so many things I've gone through in my life that have brought me to where I am right now. And if God had not given me this word at the beginning of the year, I don't think I would have been able to go through them. This word of the year has cemented me in everything that I've gone through. It says, Isaiah 41 verse 10, it says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I'll strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand." God has upheld me with his righteous hand through everything that I've gone through, losing my job, applying for a job, and doing an interview for 3 hours on different days, and the company comes out and tells you something that is not ethical. Looking for jobs left, right, and center, hearing what people who I would feel would be on my side say about me behind my back, and also having to navigate the uncertainty of life. It actually puts you in that place whereby you just have to rely on God. And I'm saying this to anyone out there. In life, there will be things that are going to test you. But if you have a word that God had spoken, as it's written in Isaiah 55 verse 11, it says that his word shall not return to him void. It shall accomplish everything that he sends it out to do. The word that God has given you, it might be your word of the year, it might be someone speaking in your life something. Believe it. And everything that you're going through in your life, God is with you. He says he will never leave you, nor will he ever forsake you. So do not doubt that God's hand is on your life. There might be things that will come that will test your faith. As you read John chapter 11, the death and eventual resurrection of Lazarus, Jesus had to wait until Lazarus had died and been buried for 4 days to resurrect him. I think even his disciples were wondering, what's happening? Jesus, Martha and Mary told you their brother is sick. Why aren't you doing anything about it? But Jesus waited until Lazarus had been dead and buried. After 4 days, the body was even stinking. But that's when Jesus came through to bring glory, to glorify God through Lazarus' situation. Sometimes something might need to die before it's brought to life. Sometimes the seed that you've received in your life might need to die before it's brought up into a plant. We see this in agriculture. For you to get something out of a seed, you plant it into the ground, and when you plant it, the first thing that happens to that seed is that it dies. And as it has died, it sprouts out to bring out the fruit. So do not be discouraged in any way if you're not seeing the result. God is with you in that mess. The message that you've received sometimes will turn into a mess before it becomes a fruit. When you look at Joseph, the dreamer, Joseph, Genesis 37, Joseph dreams about his life. He dreamed about how his life would change, how he would be a ruler. What happens to him? His brothers become envious of him. He's thrown into the desert. There he's bought by Egyptians. He ends up going into Potiphar's house. What happens in Potiphar's house? Potiphar's wife decides to allege that Joseph was going to rape him. Joseph is thrown into prison. What happens in prison? He helps someone get out of prison by interpreting their dream. And that person, when they get out of prison, what do? They forget about Joseph. It's until the king dreams about something that he can't interpret that this guy remembers and is like, oh yeah, while I was in prison, there was this guy who helped me interpret my dream. Let's call him up. And what happens to Joseph? Joseph interprets the dream of this king. And after he's interpreted the dream, his life changed. So if Joseph had given up on his dream, if Joseph had given up on the word that he had received from God, he would not have been able to do what he did. The same people who sold him in slavery are the same people he ends up serving. When they come to Joseph, they even refer to him as Lord. And Joseph is like, oh yeah, let me reveal to you who I am. What the devil sent to hurt you, what the devil sent to bring you down, could be to the glory of your name and to the glory of God's name. I like this song called You're Sovereign Over Us, and in it there is, what the enemy meant for evil, you turn it for good. You turn it for good, for your glory. What the enemy meant for evil, God turns it for your good. God turns it for his glory. So anything that you're experiencing, please know that God is with you. He is with you through it all. When I connect my career dream, when I connect my career purpose, when I connect my career story, I see that every point of my career, God has been with me. This time that I've had to be at home and raise my kids, I've grown intimate with God. If I had a job, I might not have had this time to do this work that I've done on my YouTube channels. I might not have had the time to do the work that I've done in growing closer to God, in sharing his word, in finding my life purpose as a Christian content creator. Others may look at my life and think, oh yeah, she failed because she has a PhD and she's just sitting home, or she's just doing YouTube. But the other things that God is doing in my life. And when God comes through for me, I'll be here to share with you my testimony. So I share this to encourage you that in anything that you're going through, God is with you. Do not be dismayed. Do not be afraid. Anything, however bad it may be for you, God is with you. Before I conclude this episode, I'd like us to pray. I'm going to play a song in between this episode. I just want you to pour out your heart to God and tell him that you trust him. And tell him that you trust that he has the best plan for your life. Plans to prosper you and not to bring you disaster. Plans to give you a future and a hope. Even when you think you've lost it all, he's with you. So let me play the song for you. And after the song, I'll come back and share with you a salvation prayer for anyone who wants to receive Christ.
Lord, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you. You're where my help comes from. Give me wisdom. You know just what to do. Yeah. Oh.
The reason why I include salvation in my episode is because when you receive Christ, you've received the best miracle and the best gift you'll ever give yourself. The world is almost coming to an end, and it's the people that will know Christ who will be let into the kingdom of God. If you want to receive Christ, please repeat this prayer after me. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for your Son, Jesus Christ, that you sent to die for me on the cross. Today, I confess of all my sins, and I ask that you may forgive me and cleanse me of all my iniquity. I accept Jesus as my personal Savior, and I invite Jesus to come and dwell in my heart. The old is gone and the new has come. From today onwards, I am a born-again Christian. In Jesus' name, I do pray and believe. Amen. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to my YouTube channel You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on Spotify they've introduced comments. So if you have any comments, you can leave me comments on Spotify. But if you watch the video on YouTube, please, let's engage in the comments. Let's encourage each other to grow closer to God and fulfill our life purpose. I'll catch you in the next episode, and bye-bye.
Every crown I ever won, I lay it down. Every praise I ever heard, I give it all to you. For there's nothing in this world